one of the co-presidents of the League of Women Voters of Amarillo. Jenny Anzarillo is our other co-president. Thank you for coming out today. We appreciate this. This is our last class. I know you're going to get a lot of good information from this. To begin, we always begin with some of the tenets of the League. The League is proud to be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing political parties or candidates at any level of government, but always working on issues of vital concern to members and to the public. Our mission is to empower voters and to defend democracy. And our vision is, we envision a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. So we thank you for showing up to participate today. Before we begin, Claudia Stravato, our first vice president, has something to say.
Of course. I would like to introduce, go further back so you're in the frame.
Come right here.
There you go.
Yeah.
I would like to introduce the member who's a friend of mine who made this project possible. Minnie Venable, would you please stand?
Show people how much effort it takes.
She is an active voter and an engaged voter, and when I told her that we needed a significant amount of money to put all this together and get it ready for the road, she cheerfully did it, paid for it, and so I'm very pleased. Now, she wouldn't say cheerfully, but I would say cheerfully. And I want you to know that this is in 5 segments, and we've already gotten requests from one county commissioner who has town hall meetings, and from a Lions Club to present a couple of the segments to their groups. So if you belong to a civic group that would like to have one of these segments after you watch them today, just be sure and let us know. And we hope after the first of the year to go on the road to some of the rural communities. Thank you.
And Michelle, did you want me to mention about the Panhandle Gives coming up? Okay, so the Panhandle Gives is going to be coming up. I know this is being recorded for those who are watching at home on the stream. But Panhandle Gives happens from the 20th to the 28th. And this is your chance to support and get your gift amplified for nonprofits across the Texas Panhandle. League of Women Voters of Amarillo is the only one that if you search bar League, Women, and Voters, it comes up. We're there. So we'll be outreaching to the community very soon on that, as will most of the nonprofits. And people who attend this are usually very service oriented. So get ready, everybody. Your inboxes are going to be full. But yes, anyway, thank you all for being here. I'm going to be over hiding behind the camera.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Katie Paul, and I'm going to be your presenter today. It's so nice to see everyone in the room. So this is our 4th and of this series final Civics 101 seminar. So a little bit about me before we get started, and then I'll introduce my committee members. So I am a former city manager. I served in the villages of Lake Tanglewood and Timber Creek Canyon for several years. Also worked in local government with the Panhandle Regional Planning Commission, and have always been very passionate about not just local government, but really just being a good civic participant. So I'm very excited to be here today to present this information to you and to hear your questions. It's always really interesting as a person who used to work in local government to hear the questions that the people who experience that local government every day have to ask. It really informs not only what we talk about in our presentation and how this course evolves a little bit as it continues, but it also really shows us as a committee and as the league some of the things that you all are very interested in. So also on my committee, Judy Tolk, she had to leave, but Judy worked for Max Sherman for a time, a very knowledgeable person, really helped us a lot with our logistics and planning, and of course Claudia Stravato, who has been a figure in state and local government for a very long time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started so we can be on time today. So the first thing we wanted to start out with is, Michelle already read our the vision statement of the league, but just to reemphasize that really the whole intent of this course today is that we really do envision a democracy where every person really does have the desire, the right. Here we're talking more about the knowledge and trying to increase confidence to participate in government. And this quotation from former Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis really, I thought, summed it up for me. The most important office and the one which all of us can and should fill is that of private citizen. So really, it comes from the bottom, right? So the private citizens really, in this case, are at the top. And we'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about local, state, county, et cetera, government as we continue on. So the first thing I'd like to do, just to kind of get everybody excited about this course today, is give a quick icebreaker. So put your thinking caps on. There are prizes. Can anyone name a member of the Amarillo City Council? Just raise your hand or shout it out. You've got one?
Les Simpson.
Yes, okay, very good. I'll take one more. Anyone else? Anyone else? Yes?
Josh Kraft.
Josh Kraft, very good, very good, very good, okay. And here they are, as I take this one back. You can see our members of our city council. You're very welcome. So you have the mayor, Cole Stanley, and then place 1 through 4, Josh Kraft, Don Tips, Tom Sherlin, and Les Simpson. They were all elected in May of 2023, and we'll talk more about that as we continue on. So the first thing we'd like to talk about is our city basics. So cities in Texas are created by statute. They are all chartered by the Secretary of State. And in general, there are two kinds of cities, I should say. One is home rule, which is generally a city that has more than 5,000 people in population. The other is general law, which generally has less than 5,000 people in population. Now, there are exceptions to these two forms of government, kinds of cities. Sometimes you can have a home rule city that has, a general law city that has more than 5,000, but in general, these are the two. And then there are two forms of government. So here in Amarillo, we have a council manager form of government, which means there's a city council who informs a manager. That manager carries out the will of the council and runs the day-to-day operations of the city. A very popular form of government sort of down south in the Houston area is called mayor council. This essentially means that the mayor is elected to a position and becomes the manager. So the mayor is running the day-to-day business of the city, but also serves on the council, and carries out the will of the council. Amarillo actually adopted our council manager form of government in, I believe, 1913. We were the first one in Texas, first city, to adopt that form. All of our city council members are elected in nonpartisan elections. That is, I believe, universal. Ordinances are the things that govern our city. So those are our traffic laws, things that you would go to your municipal court for. And then our cities are traditionally members of the Texas Municipal League. If you are unfamiliar with this league, it's a great resource, especially if you are active in city government or want to know what your city, your representatives are thinking about on a daily, weekly basis. The TML is a great resource for people who work for the city, people who are interested in city business. They are advocates for cities with our legislature. It's a really great thing. You can find that online. So a little more about Amarillo. We have our governing body is a mayor and 4 council members. Each one of these people is elected at large, meaning they are not elected from a single member district, or they do not have to live in the area for which they are elected to represent. So each of these people are elected at large. They do not have staggered terms. Their terms are 2 years. Those terms, you can have an entire council turn over every 2 years if that is how the votes are cast. And their salary is $10 per meeting. They are reimbursed for conferences if they're attending those, but in general, their salary is just the $10 per meeting. Yes, ma'am, Claudia.
Yes, Katie, I wanted to point out that we're the largest city in our category that doesn't have single-member districts, where there's a drawn geographical area that each representative is elected from.
Right.
And we're the largest that doesn't have, and even Plainview has single-member districts.
Yeah, single-member districts are something that many cities of our size do have. I believe that there have been several instances where single-member districts were brought up. And the thing about Amarillo is, as a home rule city, we have a charter. And to change that charter, any of those changes have to go to a vote of the citizens. So several times I believe that votes have come up, and it has always failed. I think as recent as 2011, I think there was is that right, Claudia?
There's been 2 lawsuits,
Okay.
but no election.
No election, okay, understood. But I think 2011 may have been the last time this issue came up, is what I'm intending to say here. The meetings are held every other week on Tuesdays at 3 p.m., and public comment is indeed allowed and encouraged. I believe that to make a public comment, the city prefers you call the city secretary and call in advance and get on the list. But if you are at a meeting and find an issue that you'd like to speak on, you can do that. I believe that after the registered commenters go through, the mayor does ask if anyone else in the room would like to make a public comment. You get 3 minutes. And then, of course, another facet of our council meetings are executive sessions. So there are 3 reasons why a council will go into executive session. Generally, those are legal concerns, economic development contracts, and then the other is personnel matters. And executive session is an interesting thing. It really is a time for the council to talk about things that are if spoken about, the details are spoken about in public session, it could jeopardize something. So in the case of economic development or legal issues, it could jeopardize the position of the city in trying to negotiate a contract or something like that. Though no action can be taken, I repeat, no action can be taken during the executive session, only discussion. All actions of the council have to be made in public session. So once they adjourn to executive session, they come back and make some sort of action. And they can choose to not act on whatever that item was as well. But something has to happen at the end of that executive session. There are minutes taken of it. They are very, very basic, and they do go into the public record. And then the agenda, of course, by law is intended to be posted 72 hours in advance of the meeting. It is posted at City Hall. It is also posted online so that you, the constituents, can see that information. I believe there has been some discussion with our current council about trying to get that agenda posted earlier to give you all more time to look at the issues and other things that the city is thinking about that week. But I don't think I've heard any update on that just yet. Yes, Michelle, was there an update?
They now have what they're calling a rolling agenda.
Okay, very
You can
good.
find that online.
Very good.
It is, while it doesn't say specific
Uh-huh.
date, it shows a lot of things that they are considering putting on, that are considering or in line for agenda.
Oh, I see. So it's essentially a proposed agenda item list.
Yes.
Oh, very good, very good. Okay, good. I'm glad that there was a resolution to that thought. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
There is, similar to what Michelle is talking
Mhm.
about, they have discussion items
Mhm.
versus agenda items.
Correct. Yes.
Agenda items they can take action on.
Right. Right.
Discussion items they cannot.
Right.
For example, at the last city council meeting, they discussed making Amarillo a sanctuary city for the unborn, but it was specifically listed as a discussion item. The issue now is whether it's going to come up as an agenda item.
Right, so that's a thing that many larger cities will do when there are things that they want to discuss in open session first, because, of course, your council members cannot get all together and talk about something if they're not in open public session. So you can't get the whole council together behind a closed door, essentially, unless it is during a public session and they adjourn into executive session and there are specific rules for that. So that's good. I'm very glad that you brought that up, Claudia. That was something that I neglected to mention at our last seminar, but yes, so those discussion items are very good. Also, to get those public comments about issues that the city would like to, consider for action. So discussion items versus agenda items, which are action items. Thank you so much, Claudia, for bringing that up. Yes, sir. Let me go back.
Two questions related
Yes.
to agenda.
Yes.
Claudia, in a situation like you just described, what is the process for moving an item from discussion to agenda?
A city councilman only has to notify the city secretary and the mayor.
One city council person can make it an action item.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the second is maybe the same, but who actually is empowered to put items on the agenda? That's any single, and do they only get there when some single or more than one
Well,
council
it has to
person?
be a city councilman or the mayor. And then if the city manager and the city secretary develop the, agenda.
So that separately or individually, they're just feeding the city secretary topics that end
Yes.
up on the agenda that,
Yes.
the secretary creates.
And there are many things that are routine. So some contracts like, approving contracts that have been let for construction, those are routine items that'll come onto the agenda almost no matter what. But many of those things that are a little more hot action or items for discussion or action, right, that does have a process and procedure that I believe is published on the city's website. I think it may be under the city council tab on the website. But there's a written out process and procedure for it. If you'd like even more information about that, I think they have it. And that's specific to Amarillo, so it's different in every city. Cities really are given the latitude to make the rules about how things hit the agenda. Most often cities, it just takes a council member or a mayor or one of the people who are a representative to add something to the agenda for consideration. Yeah. Thank you, very good questions. So this is a little bit about the budget. So this is a very basic look at our budget, just because in the interest of time, this was what I pulled out of their, I think the last presentation they gave right before they passed the budget in September. So this is our revenue. So what you see is the approved 2022-2023 revenue, the change, and then the proposed. And so revenue can change for many reasons. Those reasons are listed down here in the box. So sales taxes went up, property taxes also went up. And when I say property taxes went up, what I mean is the projected revenue for property taxes increased. Environmental health restructured their fees. The solid waste rates have changed. Our water and sewer rates did not have an increase for residential meters, but there was an increase for other tiered usage residential meters. And then drainage rates had a $1.58 per month increase. And so this is a quick look at our revenue for the city. And then the next one, we'll talk about the expenditures. So here are our expenditures. You'll notice that is a different number there at the end. Let me go back just so you can see. $495.5 million. And then the proposed expenditures were $531 million. So the approved from 2022 was $490 million about. The change was a similar change, $40 million, and then the proposed there at the end. And so the budgets do have to be balanced, and they use their reserve funds or rainy day funds to make up shortfalls if they indeed have them. So whenever the budget is passed, there are some things that you're probably not going to have to spend money on. So they will make budget adjustments as the year goes on, and by the end of the year, this budget does have to be balanced as they close out their year-end books. So the city council was considering, and I believe this did pass in this form, continuing current service levels as generally as we can say that, and then adding several new fire district chiefs, an aircraft training facility, new police officers, their equipment, also new police civilian positions, which I think was something that happened when Chief Drain was here. He changed some of the positions within the city's police department where everyone had to be a badged and TCOL certified officer. Instead, there were some positions that did not need that amount of expenditure in order to have someone fill that role. So I think there were several more administrative positions that were filled by civilians rather than TCOL certified officers because they were never called on to use that TCOL certification, and it made more sense apparently budget-wise to do that. They wanted to start a solid waste dedicated dumpster replacement program, which I really hope happens. That's, I know, something that's been a very hot topic for our city. They included a 30% cost of living increase for all Texas Municipal Retirement System retirees. What that means is anyone who has retired from the city of Amarillo through the Texas Municipal Retirement System would get a 30% cost of living increase. I don't think they've had one of those in several years, and with inflation, that was something that they considered. Here's another one that's very interesting: $4.5 million in working budget for future council priorities. So I believe what that means is that is money set aside for the council to use in case they want to, work on a study for something. So say they wanted to think about sidewalks. They can use that money to do a study on sidewalks or dumpsters. They could do a study on, what it would cost to put in a dumpster replacement program or something like that, or any other kind of project they might have. Those are just some things that came to mind when I was thinking about what those projects might be. Street improvements, water and sewer improvements, and then, of course, utility costs, fuel, and materials have gone up because of inflation. Yes, ma'am, Claudia, go ahead.
I think you mentioned some fire department, expenditures. Do we think that the council member who's a fireman should recuse himself from voting on fire department issues since he's a member of the department?
That's a good question. I think that would be a question for the city's legal representative. Only because I think of course, it seems like an ethical issue, though I don't know about the legality of it, since I am in no way an attorney or a legal professional. But I do think that, and I know that the city council members do seek that information from not only the city's representatives, but, if that were something that was, on his list of things that he would like to certainly would like to think about, he could even ask for, or ask his representation if that would be something he would need to think about. Because that's an even more interesting question. Now I'm trying to process it a little bit, because the city's representative is interested in protecting the city, and this would be an individual's decision to make. So I actually think he'd need to talk to his own representation about that, to get good counsel and advice. Thank you, Claudia. I hadn't thought about that yet. Very good. More information can be found, and I believe we're going to put this presentation up on our website. Can be found if you click the link. It goes to the city's most recent budget presentation, which is a very good sort of overview of the things that they were considering passing through their budget. So we'll move on from the budget if everyone's okay. Okay. So a little more about our city, including our elections. So they're held in odd-numbered years, and they are held in May on a Saturday, which is not on the normal election cycle. I do believe that's one of the reasons why our city does have historically very low voter participation and turnout, because it is on an odd day. It's on Saturday in May, and it's in odd-numbered years, and so it sort of falls off of that normal election cycle. But our terms are indeed 2 years. And our city council terms are not staggered, as we said before. Our candidates do need to file for office with the city secretary rather than with their political party. So as we continue talking, we're going to talk about people who need to file with their political party, in this case because they are not in partisan elections. They file with the city secretary. And of course, there are other, there's a filing fee. There are other reports that are needed to be filed as well. When you want to consider becoming a candidate, the city secretary's office does have all of that information and can provide it to you. And more information can also be found at amarillo.gov. So something I know that is near and dear to Sonia's heart back there. Oh, yeah, go ahead. On the slide
elections,
before? Yes, absolutely.
I'm just curious how and why certain candidates choose this place versus that place. I'm going to run for place 1, or I'm going to run for place 3, or are they, somebody else determine that? Or?
No, they pick which place they want to run in. And because we are not subdivided by, they're all at large, they don't have to consider that I live in this area of town. So I think that it is a more calculated or politically advantageous move.
Now, is it an open position?
Is it an open? Is there an incumbent?
Or who am I going up against?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And in cases where you don't have an incumbent, who will be the other candidates? And so these, particularly in our city, sometimes they come right up to the filing deadline before they file their candidacy to see who else is in that race. So I think it's certainly a calculated decision. Yes, of course, yes.
Are these places tied to precincts?
No,
1, 2, 3, 4,
they are not. That's the thing, they're not. Yeah,
nothing.
you can live wherever you want in the city and file, as long as you're inside the city limits, and file for
And the people
one of
voting
these.
for place 1, 2, 3,
They're not in a certain geographic place. It's the whole city is voting for each one of those. Yes, that's right. As Claudia said, we do not have single-member districts, which is what you're referring to. And we're one of the largest cities that does not have that system of government. Perfect, thank you. So we're going on to the court system. So we have a municipal court. The judge is appointed by the city council. And they do hear cases regarding city traffic violations, ordinance violations, parking tickets, things that are, municipal in nature. Sonia, you were the municipal court judge for a long time, weren't you? So Sonia's a former president of the league, a wealth of information about our municipal court. It's a very interesting system, and I believe the offices are just right over here, right, right by the police department? Perfect. Yes, go ahead.
The city council, mayor pointed out that there's just 2 positions.
Yes.
That the city council personally, appoints, and that's the municipal judge and the city manager.
Right. Everyone else in your government is a hired position, not appointed position. So the city manager and the municipal court judge are the 2 appointed positions within our city. Now, as we move on, the county has many, there's several appointed positions, and many elected positions, but in the city we only have those 2. So they are indeed very important. So at the end of each section, we have a how to get involved slide, and that's very important because, we want you to be involved. We want you to have the confidence to be involved in your government. So one of the best ways that you can get involved, I'd say number 2, behind voting, of course, is you can attend or speak at a city council meeting. As I said earlier, public comment is both encouraged, welcomed, and of course, by law, has to be welcomed by law. But you can also volunteer for civic service. So if, one of our co-committee members, Judy Tolk, she just adopted a dog from the Animal Management and Welfare. And I know that that's been another hot topic in our city. They do take volunteers to come in and work at their shelter. So that's some civic service you can volunteer for. I think that the zoo takes volunteers sometimes. The library takes volunteers for certain civic events. So there are many ways that you can get involved that way as well. You can apply online to serve on a board or commission. Now, those applications are now closed. They were just opened. And in your packet, you do have not only a organizational chart for the city, that's the first handout behind your agenda, a who to call, sort of if you have a question about building safety, solid waste, traffic, here's some great phone numbers that you can use. If you keep going, you'll see some more information about amarillo.gov, how you can get information about a birth certificate, a death certificate, if you'd like to read the code of ordinances, all of that. And then the next one you'll see does have a list of our boards and commissions, and we'll refer to this again later on in our presentation. Now, those applications have closed. I think they closed on October 15th, but that is an online application. You can apply to serve on up to 3 boards and commissions within our city. There are many of them, as you can see. And not all of them have openings when those applications are open. And these are also appointments that come from our city council, though these are, again, unpaid volunteer positions. There's many different things you can apply to be on. The Amarillo Area Public Health Board has been something that's been very important recently. There's also the Animal Management and Welfare Advisory Board, so another way to get involved with that organization. It has city council on there, though that's not one that you can apply to be on. I guess you can if you want to run for office. But then there's the Library Advisory Board, the Parks and Rec Board, and the list goes on. Another great place to get involved in your government. I think those are annual applications, so that should come around next fall again. You can run for office, you can email, text, or call a city council member, you can vote in an election, and then something that's brand new, not brand new, they've had it for many years, but something that I would encourage you all to do, I've been a part of it, is to apply to attend the Amarillo 101 course. So they just finished a course, I believe, this fall. I think I heard they are going to do one in the spring this year as well. So those applications and information will be available very soon on amarillo.gov for the spring semester, we'll call it a semester. It consists of several evening sessions and then several Saturday field trips where you get to see sort of the inner workings of the city. So you are taken to the transfer station where you've got solid waste is there, you've got your traffic department, your transit department, all of those people are there. You get to come to the library, you get presentations from each of the city departments. Where else did we go? We went to the, out past the airport, there's a training facility out there that the fire department uses. We talked to the bomb squad, we talked to the motors unit. We got to see a great demonstration of the motorcycles going around. They are so very good at riding. I can't even imagine how they get so good at that. But you get to see many facets of the city that are sort of a behind-the-scenes look that many people don't get. It's a free course. You just have to put in your application, and then I can't remember who it is that decides on those things, but someone from the city will put all of that together. And I believe they stopped it during the pandemic, brought it back, and I don't know if they're doing 2 a year or if it's just going to be 1 a year, but I would encourage you the next time it comes around to put in an application. Do you know? Yes.
I see that this is open for residents of Potter or Randall County, so there's not a city limit restriction on these?
On Amarillo 101 or on these?
Boards and commissions?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think you have to be in the city, just like when you speak
Oh,
before the
yes.
city, you
I
have to
think it
say,
just
"I live
means-
in the city," but that encompasses 2 counties.
Right. Now there
The
are
rural part, no.
some of these. Let me look. Let me see if I can find it. So some of these boards and commissions, they also include members from the county. And so when we get to our county section, there are some appointments that your county commissioners make to different boards. So like there's a Potter Randall Events Venue Board, I believe, that has members from people from the city and from the county. That's one that if you live out in the rural part of the county, you can ask to be appointed to, I believe. And there's a couple other ones. Yes. Yes.
I know you said the applications were closed this year.
Yes.
I know someone who did apply for
Uh-huh.
the commissions committee. Do you know when they would find out?
I think it's in November. I think it's at the next, is it the next?
It's on the agenda for the next board
Yeah.
meeting that the people are going to be presented.
Yeah.
So that's, I'm sorry.
Did they have, did they,
Next week, I think?
yeah, if there was no meeting this week, it'll be next week. Yeah.
But that's on the agenda, so
Yeah.
everybody will, they probably already know, I would think.
Okay, so they would have been notified already if they're being
I
considered.
think so.
I would think so. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, we're to our next section, our county section, and I've got another icebreaker. Put those thinking caps on. Can anyone name for me either a member of the Potter or Randall Commissioners Court? Anyone? I heard Tam Butler back there. And I think I'm gonna give one out because we have two more on this one. But does anyone have anyone else? John Coffey, very good. Anyone else? Did you have one?
Eric Berry?
Eric Berry? Anyone else? Okay, no problem. Does anyone know the judges? No? Nancy Tanner? What about the other one?
Nancy Tanner?
Yeah, we got Nancy Tanner, but what about Randall County? Also a woman. Christy Dyer, that's the other one.
Christy Dyer.
Yes. So I'm going to tell you about the county first, and then I will show you their photographs, and you can see everyone who's in the 2 counties. So in Texas, our counties are created by the Constitution. There are 254 counties in Texas, and each one of those counties does have 4 precincts, no matter the size of the county. And in this case, when I say precincts, what I mean is the next bullet, all of your county commissioners and the judge are in partisan elections, so they do file with a party, and then the commissioners are in single-member districts. So, as we were talking about earlier, the city does not have single-member districts. In this case, the person who runs for office and is elected, or just runs for office in a single-member district, must reside in that district. So there are places here again but these are limited to a specific geographic area. So I just want to make that very clear. Our constitutional commission structure here in Texas is that we have one county judge and 4 commissioners. And whenever I said no matter the size of the county, what I mean is there are some counties down in the Texas Triangle between Houston, Austin, San Antonio that are, an 8, maybe even small, like a 16th of the size of our county, a county here in the Panhandle. But then in the Big Bend area, there are counties that make up maybe 3 or 4 of our county here in the Panhandle. So no matter the size, you still have those 4 county commissioners and 1 county judge. Yeah, go ahead.
Back to the previous single-member districts.
Mm-hmm.
In this, on this subject of county,
Mm-hmm.
could we also simply call that single-member precincts?
Well, they're precincts, but the process is called single-member districts.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference?
It's same thing.
It's just a different word for the same thing. Yeah.
There's precinct 1, 2, 3, and 4
Mm-hmm.
in counties.
Mm-hmm.
But that process of voting that way is called single-member districts. You
And-
gotta live in that district.
And I believe in state statute, it's referred to as single-member districts, even though they are in the county called precincts. Yeah.
So the precinct is
Mhm.
a word to refer to the division of the 4 commissioners
Correct.
within the district.
Correct. Yeah. So if you pull up a precinct map, you'll see that there are 4 in each county, and we're talking about the same thing when we say single-member districts. Yeah. So their agenda is posted again 72 hours in advance of the meeting, just like the city is. That's a state statute that must be done. Potter County holds their meetings on the 2nd and 4th Monday at 9 a.m. I believe they are meeting at the courthouse. Randall County, the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays at 9 a.m., and I believe they're still meeting on Zoom, is what we were told the last time we had this. And then just for some transparency, we wanted to talk about their salaries because we did talk about the city salaries. So in Potter County, the judge's salary is $141,000. This is all public record, by the way. And then the commissioners, I believe, are paid $42,000 per year. Randall County, their judge is $131,000, and the commissioners are $40,000. Each one of these positions, as I said, is elected, and a little different from the city, they do receive this yearly salary. And they do have, they have the same number of meetings, but there are their salaries for you. Here is Potter County. So we have Judge Nancy Tanner, H.R. Kelly in Precinct 1, Blair Schaefer, John Coffey, and Warren Coble there. And you'll see when they were elected, they are on staggered, their terms are staggered. So you have the county judge, Precinct 2 and 4 are coming up for election at the same time, and then Precincts 1 and 3 are coming up at the same time. They do serve 4-year terms. And so I believe Precinct 1 and 3 are about to come back up again for election here in the next year.
Katie?
Yeah, go ahead.
The county having staggered
Mhm.
terms prevents starting back from 0.
Right.
Like we did with the city.
Right.
Everybody's new and, they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
But having it staggered keeps continuity of knowledge and history.
And that's a great point. With the city, when you have an entire council turning over, which we didn't quite have because Cole Stanley had been a council member before the mayor. But you can have, there's a large learning curve to learn everything that makes a city work and run. And so I do believe that in the beginning, certainly they have to take a lot more time than a seasoned council member might have to do. So in the county, again, another learning curve if you were not previously part of county government. But whenever you have these staggered terms, it's a little easier because you have people who have experience along with people who are new, and so they can learn from them a little bit as well as meetings go on and as they do trainings together and things like that. Yes, Michelle? Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I'm going back a little bit.
Go ahead.
I did notice in the last city council meeting,
Mm-hmm.
Mayor Stanley mentioned as a possible, something to put on the agenda
Mhm.
as changing to staggered terms.
Okay.
So
Okay.
evidently they are thinking about this.
Well, good. So that's another item coming up, I guess, for probably discussion and.
He just mentioned.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, at the last city council meeting, Mayor Stanley did mention the possibility of discussing staggered terms again for the city of Amarillo. Another one of those things that you can definitely make your voice heard about, especially if it becomes a discussion item first. So I'd encourage you to go and make your voice heard at the city council meeting. So these are our Potter County commissioners. Next, we'll look at Randall. And here they are. We've got Judge Christy Dyer, Rusty Carnes in Precinct 1, Eric Berry, Bob Robinson, and Tam Boatler. There, you've got them. Again, I believe they are on the same election schedule. The judge, Precinct 2 and 4 all come up at the same time, and 1 and 3 come up at the same time as well. Their terms are 4 years, and the county judge 2 and 4, they were just elected, and then 1 and 3 are going to come up here very soon as well. All right. More about the county, including where they have jurisdiction. So they have jurisdiction in areas that are not within the city limits. And what I mean by that is, the city of Amarillo sits in 2 different counties, in Randall and Potter. But the city of Amarillo is not the only city in these 2 counties. So in Potter County, you also have the village of Bishop Hills. That's an incorporated city. And then you have the city of Amarillo. I believe those are the only 2 in Potter County. But in Randall County, you have the city of Amarillo, you have the village of Lake Tanglewood, the village of Timber Creek Canyon, the village of the Palisades, and then you also have the city of Canyon, which is, in sort of southern Randall County. And then I think they have just a little sliver of Happy, it's the city of Happy down there at the very bottom, very southern end of Randall County. And I believe those are the only incorporated cities in Randall County. And whenever I say village, same thing as city. Those are the exact same thing. It's just a sort of older term for a city is village. And that's a more complicated thing we can talk about after we're done here today. But the county has jurisdiction outside of the city limits of those entities. And so those boundaries can overlap. So the 3 villages in Randall County, Timber Creek, Tanglewood, and Palisades are right next to each other. But outside of those city limits, outside of those boundaries is where the county does have jurisdiction. They have many services that they provide out in the county, including road and bridge. They set a budget and tax rate. They provide fire services, law enforcement, the courts and jail system. They do tax collection, probation. In the case of, I believe it's Potter County, and Potter County has a sort of district that they work with, a several county district. They conduct elections, they provide voter registration services, medical services for indigent citizens. They record public documents and motor vehicle registrations. There are some other things like burn bans and other things that we left off the list because we talk about them in other parts of our slides. But these are in general the services that are provided out in the county. Okay? So these are our elected officials in the county. There are many of them. The commissioners, there are 4. The constables, there are 2, I think, or does it depend on the size of the county? There's a county attorney, an auditor treasurer, the county clerk, the court at law judges, the county judge, the district attorney, the district clerk, the district judge. And the difference between county and district, all of that has to do with how the legal system is set up, which we'll talk about in a moment. Our justices of the peace, the sheriff, the tax assessor, collector. So whenever you go to the polls for your county election, many of these offices are up at the same time. And so it is a very long ballot. I think that's another reason maybe why we do have lower voter participation and turnout in the state of Texas for some of our elections, is because not only do you have a city that's on an odd election cycle, right, which is by statute on that odd election cycle, but then you also have all of these offices that are up at the same time. Not all, but many of them that are up at the same time on a very long ballot when you go to vote for your county officials. But each one of them has a different position within the county. Each one of them runs their own department sort of independently of the commissioners and the commissioners' court. And they're all very important for the functioning of not just the justice system, but your county overall. Yeah, go ahead. Let me go back.
This should have been obvious to me, but the people who are able to elect or vote for the county officials have to live outside
No.
of municipal?
No,
okay.
just in the county.
But the only expenditures and management that the county officials manage is outside of municipalities.
Correct.
That's right.
Correct. And so the people who are sort of administering those funds are the commissioner's court. Sonia, do you have something else to add? Go ahead.
Yes, I want to add that, of course, a lot of things that county government does involves things that happen inside city limits.
Right.
So if you have a
city of Amarillo, your county district attorney
Mhm.
is gonna prosecute that, and your county jail is gonna hold that person. So there are overlaps between county and
Mhm.
city jurisdiction with regard to those functions the county controls, such as prosecution, jail services, court services.
So does that mean there is not a city jail or a city district attorney?
There is a city jail.
Not anymore.
Well,
They contract with Randall County.
I understand. There's a city jail for cities, but they usually contract with
Mhm.
some county jail to do that function. But there is a city prosecutor, but they only handle city ordinances.
Mhm.
So, a felony crime, other misdemeanor crimes, they're handled by your county attorney or your district attorney.
Mhm.
And every county can be different. Randall County has a combined office called a criminal district attorney. Potter County has a county attorney and a district attorney. So, there are overlaps between these two forms of government in terms of geographic jurisdiction.
Isn't it primarily in criminal justice though?
Primarily in criminal justice, but for example, someone who lives in the city and wants to record a deed to their house goes to the county to record that deed, not to the city.
Right. And when I say jurisdiction is outside of the city limits, I'm really talking about like road and bridge. So they take care of the roads that are outside of the city limits, that are not taxed out roads, they take care of those county roads. Law enforcement services are generally provided outside. Of course, fire services are provided outside, though they do have contracts where they're intergovernmental contracts and memorandums of understanding where they can also, respond to an emergency or a fire that's inside of a city limits, and that's okay. All of that is done. It's a very interesting and intricate system, not only on the judicial and legal side, but on the intergovernmental side. It's all sort of wrapped up, but in the most general sense, when we're talking about jurisdiction, we mean not the judicial system. We're talking about other things. Yes, go ahead, Shania.
The county form of government is the oldest form of government in the United States, and it
Yep.
comes from England.
Right.
And it is the oldest form, and it's kind of archaic in the way it runs. But we've had people bring up in these meetings that the city commissioners really have more work and more people that they're responsible for than county commissioners, and yet county commissioners and judges are paid a lot of money.
The county is the form of government that is closest to the people, because everyone lives in a county.
Right,
So, not everyone lives in a city.
right.
If you don't live in a city, city government doesn't affect you, but every person is affected by county government.
Right, in some way. So it's a deed to your house that's been recorded in the county. It's your motor vehicle taxes get paid to the county, your registration for your car. If you don't have a car, don't own a home, you are probably still interacting with that county in some way, no matter what. Thank you, Sonny. I love that, how you said that. It's the closest form of government to the people. It's true, but it's maybe the form of government we probably know the least about as a populace. So that's the whole reason for these seminars. So we'll move on to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about zoning and budget. So there is no zoning in the county. So if you live in a city, you are likely familiar with zoning laws, which really means that the city is responsible for and can decide the way that land is used. So be that for commercial purposes, for residential purposes, et cetera. But in the county, they do not have zoning. So in the county, it is easier to build a farm if you'd like to do that, or to build a business next to a home. You can do that in the county. There are no rules or regulations about that. But the unincorporated areas can be annexed by a city with appropriate notice. So this, for a long time, was different. But now, the newest law, the current regulation, is that if an area of the county would like to be annexed by a city, 100% of the registered voters in that area must vote, of the landowners, not registered voters, the landowners must vote to be annexed into the city. Now, this is only really used now by developers. So, say it's a development. I'll take Heritage Hills as an example. As Heritage Hills was being developed, one person owned all of the land that the houses would be developed on, right? And so that person petitioned the city for annexation. They held an election. That person, or a company or whoever it was, that person voted yes, that they would like to be annexed by the city. So then that area was annexed. That let them have access to city services like water, sewer, trash, etc. Whereas if they had not been annexed, then they would have had to be responsible for their own water, usually from a well, sewer, on-site sewer facilities, or if they wanted to create what's called I think it's called a municipal utility district, which is or some sort of utility district. I don't remember if it's a municipal one, but it's a utility district that lies outside of a city where there's a water supplier who provides water and sewer services and all of that to that area of land. But a little less complicated way to say it is that unincorporated areas can be annexed, but only if there's appropriate notice and 100% of the people who live there say yes, they would like to be annexed. Some examples of areas that are not incorporated in the counties are Bushland in Potter County. They are not incorporated into the city of Amarillo. They are not an incorporated area on their own. They do rely on the county for services, so law enforcement, fire protection, that kind of thing. River Falls in Randall County is also not an incorporated area. They again rely on the county for their fire protection, law enforcement services, etc. These areas could be incorporated into their own city or into a city in just a moment if they wanted to be, but I believe that would be very hard to do. Yes, sir.
Is there any compensation going either way when an annexation happens? From the government to the city to the property owners, from the property owners to the city?
No. And that was a big issue several years ago. I believe that the city manager's office brought up something called impact fees, and maybe you've heard of these. They're usually used in very large cities, though some cities of our size have been instituting them. Essentially what that means is that whenever an area wants to be annexed, like a developer, as I said, Heritage Hills, whenever that area would like to be annexed, that developer pays impact fees in order to have water and sewer run to them. Because the way it is right now, us, the taxpayer, are responsible for all of the money it takes to get that water and sewer infrastructure to that new land. Now, the city does get new property taxes from it, right, and new fees from it, but it's not been proven that can outweigh the burden of getting that water and sewer infrastructure there because, water and sewer infrastructure, it's not just the pipes, it's new lift stations, it's new water treatment plants, it's the problem we're having with the Hollywood water treatment facility, so these things have to be maintained and upgraded. So in many cases, I think, and this was the reason why this was brought up by the city manager's office, the taxpayers are bearing a higher burden than if we had just had the developers pay a fee. Now, of course, that fee then from the developer gets passed on to whoever buys the homes in that area, of course, because that's just how things work, right? Maybe not, but in my mind, that's what would happen. The houses would be a little more expensive because the developer wants to get that money back, right? But as it stands now, no, there is no money changing hands for those areas, no. The county offices are in the courthouse or in annexes. I believe Potter County has the courthouse. They've got the Santa Fe building. Randall County has, the Justice Center and the annex here in Amarillo. And the Commissioner's Court does control their county departments through their budget. And what I mean by that is, the Road and Bridge Department, the Sheriff's Office, the Fire Department, all of these entities, the Tax Assessor Collector's Office, they all are running independently. There is no central person, no manager. The county judge is not the manager. There is no person that runs the day-to-day business of the county. Each one of the offices act independently. So to exercise some sort of control over those county offices, the county commissioners really have the budget as their sort of give and take that they can use in order to, and it's not really control, that's not the right word. It's not really influence either, but those are maybe the best words we can use to describe that. But all county revenue really comes into a general fund, and we'll see that on the next slide. We'll talk about both of the budgets for the two counties. But in essence, because most of their money, I mean a majority, almost 90%, really comes from property taxes, and that's it. They don't have water and sewer that they provide. There are no other funds like that. Because it's mostly property taxes, it just comes into a general fund, and then it goes out of a general fund. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Is Bushland and River Falls and
Uh-huh.
but they get services from the county?
Uh-huh.
But do they pay taxes to the county?
Yes, they pay regular county taxes like you and I do, yes. But they don't, they pay regular taxes the way that we do, and they do get those services. The problem can be when you have a very large area such as Bushland that needs more services than the rest of the county. You can sometimes have an imbalance of, if budgets are not appropriated correctly, you can have an imbalance of services. So people who live in maybe Valle de Oro or, northern, going up, northern Potter County toward Dumas, they may not get the same services as people in Bushland, which can be, as I said, an imbalance. It's the people who live in the county and who get those sorts of services, though they do pay their property taxes, just like we all do, they really have to depend on their county government to be, as we said, they're closest to the people, right? The county is the closest to the people. They have to depend on their county to be very prudent with how funds are distributed and how services are being rendered to people. Yes. Did you have something, Claudia? Okay. And then, of course, again, their budgets do have to be balanced. They do make budget amendments and adjustments as the year goes on, and they do have some rainy day funds or reserve funds that they can use for that. And in some cases, it's just that they plan to have this, this level of service. They couldn't hire this many people, and so they do have things that come out of the budget by the end of the year, and it gets balanced as it all shakes out. So we'll start with Potter County. On the left are their revenues, on the right are their proposed expenditures. You'll see the big piece of each of these pies is what's called the general fund. This came right out of their 22-23 budget document, which was passed at the beginning of their budget year in September of 22. They just finished that fiscal year just in the last month or a month and a half. And now they're on their 23-24. Now that information, when we put this presentation together, was not yet available. So we're working off last year's budget here for these slides. And I used these pie charts because they were the most simple sort of illustrations that they had in their budget document. If you'd like to see more, though, about how that general fund is broken up by each department or each office, you can see that. It is on their website. It is posted. It is public information. And you can go to either of the county websites to see that. But as you can see, they've got their general fund. The yellow on both sides is their capital projects fund. And so that's debt services yellow here. Capital projects is yellow on the other side, I believe. And then they have a special revenue fund there at the bottom. So they have debt service, which is to fund things like infrastructure, so road and bridge. They don't just have the money, in the bank ready to go for some of those road and bridge projects, especially if they're very large. And so they do have some debt service that they have to pay on. They also have their special revenue projects, and then capital projects can be that can be like buying a new road grader, that can be buying a new fire truck. Those sorts of things are listed as capital projects. And it's different for every county. Yes, Sonia, do you have something to add? Go ahead.
One great example of a capital
Uh-huh.
project in Potter County is the new district courts building
Yes.
here downtown.
Yes.
And if you live in Potter County and you've ever been called for jury duty, you used to go to the current district courts building,
Mm-hmm.
which was not a very good building.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, after many complaints and many years, the county built a new one. And so soon it will open, and that's a great example of a capital project.
Yes, most definitely. So capital projects can be the district courts building that they're building, which looks fabulous, and I love it. Yeah, go ahead.
Capital projects are not actually in the budget.
Well, they
They're not operating expenses.
I can't answer that.
No, that's right. It's not an operating expense. It's listed as a line item as a capital project normally.
So related to this, is it the norm historically for counties, Potter here, to run deficit budgets? And then secondly, how and when does money get put into the quote-unquote rainy day fund?
So you see there is a deficit here. Normally when the budget is passed at the beginning of the year, yes, there's a deficit there. But the way that it shakes out by the end of the year is there are some things that they plan for that don't happen. So maybe it's a capital project that doesn't get funded, doesn't get let that year because of problems. So maybe the architectural and engineering plans don't come in on time or whatever it is. And so then by the end of the year, they've made budget adjustments and that stuff falls out of the budget. It can also be that they had planned for an operating expense for something that doesn't happen. So maybe the tax collector assessor's office has 15 staff. They only had 12 staff because they had openings and they didn't get to fill them that year, and so those things will fall out again. Usually those rainy day funds are just historically from projects that don't happen. Maybe in one year they actually had a surplus of revenue, and normally that doesn't happen. This is usually the norm from what I've seen. But sometimes by the end of the year, there's just money left over. And so they can put that into reserve fund, but it has to be used whenever they run a deficit like this. So by the end of the year, if they're not back to that 75, they do. So by the end of the year, if they're not to that 75 on their expenditures, they'll have to use money to make it up from a reserve fund. I can also say that some of this information, some of this here could also be, and we speculated about this last time, and I didn't get a chance to confirm it, but our cities and counties did receive some of those American Rescue Plan funds. And so some of this may be American Rescue Plan funds that were not accounted for when the budget was passed. And so some of that could be those funds are not being used to make up a shortfall, but rather to fund a project, maybe not a capital project, but maybe to fund, a general operating expense, which is allowed, and so then some of that money comes out, if that makes sense. Or to buy a fire truck that they had planned to be an expenditure, but now it's no longer a regular, expenditure from a fire truck. It'll be covered by rescue plan funds. You'll see the same sort of thing on the next slide for Randall County. It's actually a larger deficit. This is again their 22-23. Budget. You can see that's a much larger deficit. Randall County does, though, have a higher tax base than Potter County does. It also has more services. So they do provide juvenile probation services, and they do have the juvenile detention center, and those are broken out. You'll see those. They're in the same color. It's sort of that salmon color on that pie chart, and I know it's hard to read up here. But the main thing is the big purple, that's their general fund. So that's taxes in and taxes out. Then that's usually your general operating expenditures. Everything else that's broken out, there's a special revenue fund, a debt service, a capital projects. Then they have internal services. So they actually break out some of their internal services like their accounting. So I think it's every 2 years counties have to be audited. Cities every year have to be audited. But counties can be audited every 2 years. I believe that the larger counties are audited every year. Those services come from that internal services fund. And there are other places that those funds can come from as well. But again, this information is from the budget document from 2022-23. You can get more information about it on their website. Again, it is public information and public record, and it breaks down some of their expenses even further. So if you really are interested in the fire department, or you're very interested in the sheriff's office, it has a breakdown of how much their salaries are, the general pool of salaries, and then how much jail services are, and all of that stuff is broken down in that budget if you'd like that information as well. All right. So moving on, the county judge, these are their responsibilities. They do handle probate, guardianships, hot checks, and mental commitments. An important thing to note is that a county judge is not required to hold a law license or a legal degree. Interestingly, though, the sheriff, whoever is elected to be the sheriff, does have to have a TCOL certification. So they must be a certified, have a certification and a license to be a peace officer in the state of Texas. But a county judge does not have to have a law license or a legal degree, is what I'm trying to say. The county does not have ordinance-making authority. So contrary to the way that the city runs, the county does not make ordinances unless they are authorized by the legislature to do so. One of those examples is a burn ban. So a burn ban may be passed by a county in the interest of public safety. That is something that the legislature authorizes a county to do. They also have boards and commissions that are appointed by the county commissioners, as we talked about earlier. Some of these are the Potter Randall Welfare Board, there's a Potter Randall Event Venue Board, and you see these are Potter Randall, so they're combined. This is very typical when you have counties that share cities and share intergovernmental duties like this. So you'll have this in areas much like Amarillo. The Potter Public Defender MAC Board, the Potter Randall Appraisal District, which we will talk about in depth later. So save your questions about PRAD. The County Election Board, there's a County Ballot Board. This is just a sample of some of those boards and commissions that are appointed by the Commissioner's Court. I believe that they do not have an online application the way the city does. I believe that to be appointed to one of these boards, save PRAD, that one's a little different, the way it works. I believe that you have to speak with the county commissioner about that, as far as I understand. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
This question may be a bit of a squirrel.
No,
but,
go for it.
For guardianships,
Uh-huh.
is that I have twofold. Is it
Okay.
guardianships over minors and incapacitated adults?
Mhm.
And does Texas or does the county do conservatorships as well, or only guardianships?
That's a,
Repeat the question.
I don't know about conservatorships, do you, Sonia?
so the question, so just for our video audience, the question was, let me see if I can repeat it correctly. Does the county, was it the guardianships? Was it for minors or just mentally incapacitated adults? And then the other one was about conservatorships. If it's
For
the,
both.
yeah.
Difference between the two?
Well, a conservatorship, I believe, is where, well, I don't know.
Well, so certain states do guardianships and
Mhm.
conservatorships. The main difference from what I've learned is conservatorships automatically include the financial aspect of a
Okay.
person's care.
Okay,
Guardianships in some states may be limited only to their home care, personal
Okay.
care, and not
Okay.
necessarily, it depends,
Mhm.
if they also allow financial care, but it's state by
Okay.
state. And can be county by county, I think.
Okay.
I just didn't know about our county or our state.
right, so conservatorships are traditionally include the financial aspect, but the guardianships include the, may not include the financial aspect, it may just be their care.
Yeah.
And it depends on the state and the county and all of that. Okay, yes, Claudia?
And I learned recently, I always, in my narrow mind, thought that guardianships was when Uncle Joe, got guardianship over his great aunt who never married and had any kids and was giving all of her money away to the yard people. And I thought it was a personal family thing. Well, that's not it at all. The state health, agencies can assign Joe Blow to be a guardian over Jane Q, and they don't even know one another.
Mm-hmm.
And those are abused horribly, is what I have learned lately.
Or it can be an organization that they appoint over, yeah, it could be someone they
Right.
don't know, it
Yeah.
could be a family member, but usually it goes through the court system to
Mhm.
determine whether that
Mhm.
entity or individual should be caring for them.
A good resource for asking that question might be Nancy Tanner, the Potter County judge. She's very available, and I know that she's been doing these for a long time. So she may have some more information for you about that.
Just email her.
Yeah, just send her an email or call her. She's in the office a lot of the time, so you can call her and get that information.
Katie,
Yes.
I cannot imagine the difference between the county election board and the county ballot board.
Okay, there is a difference.
Can you tell us?
Yes. No, go ahead. I'm not an expert in this, and I know there's a difference, but I'm not going to say it quite right.
Well, the county election board is set out in Texas election code, and they oversee the election administrator, and they appoint the election administrator. And the county, we call it the early voting ballot board,
Mhm.
and they are in charge of, in essence, the early voting absentee ballots.
Did
And
they
so-
count them?
Well, they are in charge of, like, when the ballots come in, they, verify the signatures match and things like that, they open them, and then they walk through the process of adjudicating them with a staff from our office.
This is the Potter County voter administrator.
But don't say your name yet, because you're an answer to a trivia question. So don't say your name yet, okay? All right. Yeah.
Get it right.
Yeah. So the election board is the board, and I have who they are in a later slide, but the election board is who appoints the elections administrator, right? And then the ballot board is the early voting ballot board, and they're the ones that are in charge of you said absentee early voting ballots?
The mail-in ballot.
The mail-in ballots. Okay, perfect. Well, and we will talk about those in our election section for sure. And we have a couple more slides, I promise, and then we have a break. So we're almost to that break, I promise. A bit about property taxes. So first, I need to make clear that what you're seeing on the screen, the dollar there, it is from a City of Amarillo budget presentation from several years ago. These are just estimations. This is not correct for your tax bill right now. So please don't take these numbers as true and correct fact, okay? These are an illustration and only here for illustrative purposes to show you that each one of the dollars that you pay in property taxes go to several different entities, okay? And I just thought it was a great visualization, especially for me, to think about where each one of my tax dollars went, each piece of it goes. So, cities, counties, special districts, they all collect property taxes, and we'll talk about special districts in a second. But the Potter-Randall Appraisal District is operated independently and conducts valuations for your property taxes. Now, this is my PRAD slide, so we're going to get into it. There is an appraisal district board of directors, and there's an appraisal review board, okay? So the board of directors are nominated by the taxing entities. Now, in Potter County, I believe the taxing entities include the Water Conservation District, the City of Amarillo, Potter County, Amarillo IC, Amarillo College, and then depending on where you live, I can't remember if Bishop Hills collects taxes or not. That doesn't really matter because I don't think anyone in the room lives in Bishop Hills. But the point is, any of the entities in that county or in the area who are part of the appraisal district, they all can nominate a person to sit on the board. Okay. Then each of those taxing entities has a number of votes they can cast for those nominated individuals, proportional to their share of the total tax revenue in the district. Okay? So what that means is, in a nutshell, if you look at the dollar, and we're using these as approximate numbers, Amarillo ISD takes about almost 50% of that dollar, right? Well, that's pretty true in Canyon ISD as well. It's generally almost 50% of the dollar. So Amarillo ISD and Canyon ISD are probably going to have a majority of those votes, right, that get to be cast for those nominated people. But each one of the taxing entities gets a number of votes proportional to how much money they have in the district. That is how the Appraisal District Board of Directors are elected. Now, the Appraisal District Board of Directors are the people that are responsible for hiring and firing, of course, right? The chief appraiser, which I think his name is Jeff, maybe. I think that's right. I can't remember anymore. But they're the ones who have that authority. And then he's the one who has his staff. They are also the ones who are responsible for approving the budget for PRAD each year, because they do have a budget, because they do collect money from each of the taxing entities in order to provide those services, right? So they have a budget. And that's the Appraisal District Board of Directors. Now, the board that you may be more interested in is the Appraisal Review Board. So, when your home or property is appraised and you don't feel that that appraisal was fair, right? Either way, fair, good or bad. You go to the Appraisal Review Board. Each of the people who are on the Appraisal Review Board are elected for 2-year terms, appointed for 2-year terms. And they are appointed by the local administrative judge. And Claudia, remind me whose name that is.
It's Woodburn in Potter County.
Yep.
And
Tatiana Frausto in Randall County. So there's an administrative judge for each county, and they appoint the people who are on this appraisal review board. So that is how the board of directors are nominated and elected, right, from the taxing entities. And then the appraisal review board, who you all will have more interaction with, probably, they are appointed by the local administrative judge. And I believe that you do have to live in that county to which you are appointed a member of. Yes?
While those numbers 46 and 28 and 18 are not exact,
right,
those relationships
correct.
Are correct.
Correct.
In other words, the largest amount of our tax dollars go to the Amarillo ISD.
Or Canyon, yeah,
Yeah.
depending on which you live in. And
Yeah.
in your packet, I'll refer to it one more time. Turn to the next page if you were on the second page of the boards and commissions. You will see tax bills. So the top is Randall County, the bottom is Potter County. So this happens to be a tax bill from someone who lives in both counties. Can anyone tell me how you decide how you vote when you live in both counties? And I think it's true. I don't know. We'll
It's
ask.
where you sleep.
It's where you sleep, right? Isn't that how you determine?
If your bed is in Randall County,
Yeah.
you vote in Randall County.
Right.
But your living room can be in Potter County.
Right.
Or if
Right.
most of your bed.
Right. Most of your bed. Yeah. Yes.
You could move your bed.
Yeah. So you'll see there's some there's some differences in the two tax bills. So the Potter bill at the bottom has it says Panhandle Water. It's a groundwater conservation district. So in this case, this property, is in Potter County and is part of the Panhandle groundwater conservation district. So that's another taxing entity. And we'll talk about special districts. That's a special district. There are very many of them, and we'll speak about it in a moment. But then there's some other differences. You'll see there's Amarillo College on Potter, and in Randall it says Amarillo Junior College, which it's just a different way to say it. It's the same entity. Sonia, did you have something?
I just want to point out on the election of the appraisal board.
Uh-huh.
That in this constitutional amendment election, Proposition 4, change that, are you gonna talk about that?
I was not, but I'd love for you to go ahead and talk about it.
Well, currently all your appraisal district board members are appointed, but if Proposition 4 passes, the legislature can require counties of $75,000 or more, 75,000 residents or more, to elect 3 out of 9 appraisal board members.
Oh, so,
Change your board to have some elected members.
so some elected from the voters, members. Oh, interesting.
It's unclear how exactly, would it be kind of like a city election, a nonpartisan election?
Right.
Or would these folks run on a partisan basis? It's gonna be an interesting thing if it passes.
Is it the review board or the board of directors?
It says the local appraisal board.
I would believe that means the review board. I don't think that means the board of directors.
I can't tell you because I haven't looked at
Yeah,
that. That's a really long proposition.
okay, but that's Proposition 4.
Proposition 4.
May have some implications on how our appraisal board is done. Okay, understood.
Do we know what that problem is, what that solution is intended to solve?
Yeah.
What problem that,
Yeah. Yeah, what problem is that intended to solve? It's a good question.
Just having at least some people that you've elected to serve on the board rather than all appointed.
All appointed.
So you have some direct say.
representation?
Sure.
Representation.
Interesting,
Are we
yes.
getting close to the break?
Yes. I promise, we are getting close to the break. Let me tell you, there is one more slide, and we're at the break, and it's a very fast slide. So again, at the end of each section, we have a how to get involved. It is very similar to the city, but you can attend a commissioner's court meeting. You can make a public comment. Again, they are required by law to take public comment and, of course, welcome and encourage public comment. You can become a volunteer deputy registrar, which many people in the League of Women Voters are. It is a great tool to get people interested in, not just interested in voting, but registered to vote. You can also run for office, and to do that, you file with your party, you pay a fee. Again, there are other reports and things that have to be filed, but you do start that process by filing with your party. You can email, text, or call your county judge or commissioner. That's another really great way to get your voice heard on issues that you think are affecting your county. And again, you don't have to live in the rural part of the county to talk to your county commissioner, because they still, the county commissioners still represent you even if you live inside of the city limits. And you can, of course, the ultimate is vote in a local election. So vote in an election for your county commissioner's court or any one of those elected officials we had on that slide. The Potter County Courthouse, of course, is at 500 South Fillmore, and the Randall County Justice Center, because they don't use the courthouse, it's on the square, but they do not have administrative offices in it, is at 501 16th Street in Canyon. Now, yes, go ahead. They meet at every, I think it's, I have it on a slide. It's every 2 weeks. It's like the second and fourth Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, Randall is,
Tuesday, and
Tuesdays.
Potter's Monday. Yeah, when they meet. And then I think they're both at 9 a.m. And I think it's the second and fourth Tuesday and Monday, depending. That information, once again, is on their website. And Randall County is meeting by Zoom, and Potter is meeting in person still. So it should be fairly accessible to get to either one of those meetings. And now, we have a break.
The next sections on state and special districts and elections are really interesting.
And I think we'll take that 15-minute, well, yeah, we'll go ahead and take that 15 minutes because I think we can get done on time. So, yeah, 15 minutes from now, it's 10:37. Alrighty, thank you so much, everybody. So I've got another icebreaker, I've got another trivia question, and I've got 2 prizes. Everyone ready? Thinking caps on? Okay, can anyone name for me a state representative or senator for the Panhandle region? Yes? John Smithy, there's one. Got one more prize. Anybody?
Ronnie Jackson.
Ronnie Jackson, thank you very much. Well, wait, he's US.
US, yeah.
He's US. If any, I'll give it to you unless someone else has another
For
state.
price.
You already won one. Can I get it over here? Or do you want it? What do you want?
Yeah, we had a lady one week who took
You're
3 prizes.
She did, she got all of them.
We asked her if she wanted to share them, and she said no.
She was gonna give them to her grandchildren. Yes, well, yes, so Ronnie Jackson is a US, but that's okay. So John Smithy. We've got Ford Price, we've got Ken King, who's also here in the Panhandle, and then Kevin Sparks is our senator for District 31 here in the Panhandle as well. So Ford Price and John Smithy both office out of Amarillo. Ken King offices out of Canadian up in Hemphill County. So we're on our state section, and then the next one after that will be elections, and then we'll be done. So here we are for state. Those are our elected representatives and our senator here in the Panhandle. And now we will talk about our state. So we are still operating under the Constitution of 1876. Our state constitution is changed through amendment, and we have one of the most amended constitutions in the United States. We have 519 amendments to date. The amendments do have to be approved by the voters, and this was just a fun fact, I didn't know this, but our state decided to codify the Equal Rights Amendment and add it as an amendment to our state constitution, which is very interesting. We're one of the only ones who did it. And that just kind of blew my mind that we went that far to actually put it into our Constitution as an amendment. There are 14 proposed amendments on the ballot in November 2023. In your packet, the next, if you'll turn to the next page, you will see a listing of those proposed constitutional amendments, 1 through 14. These constitutional amendments, of course, you can get more information from a trusted source, be it a League of Women Voters Guide. Sonia has one right there. They are available here at the library, but also there are other trusted sources that you can seek out to find more information about those, including the Secretary of State's website, which is down there on the bottom, and will be linked on the presentation once that is posted online for you all. But the Secretary of State has sort of the text of the constitutional amendments there for you. And that is coming up on November 7th. Early voting has just closed. So Tuesday is when we go to the polls for regular election day voting on our constitutional amendments. So please make it to the polls if you don't mind, if you haven't already voted. And we'll talk about that some more in a second. So we do have 150 local representatives. So people like Ford Price, John Smithy, Ken King, and 31 senators, which of course is Kevin Sparks. He offices out of Odessa, as you see there. Claudia noted at several of these presentations that we will only ever have 31 senators unless that is changed by law. So there are 31 senators in the state of Texas that represent sort of almost, they represent more people, I think, even than our U.S. congressmen do. So Kevin Sparks actually represents almost 1 million people, and I believe that Ronnie Jackson only represents maybe 750,000, maybe a little less than that. And so our senators, they are at almost 1 million people, because I think are we just over 31 million in the state, I think, from this last census. Our representatives do serve 2-year terms. They are not staggered. So those representatives those offices can turn over every 2 years. And then senators do serve 4-year terms, and their terms are staggered. The difference being, I'm not really sure, other than it's by law, but I don't know if there's a reason why one is staggered and one is not. Claudia, do you know that
Well,
reason?
It's always been believed that
Mm-hmm.
senators were wiser and had more experience.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be older when they're
Ah.
elected than a state rep.
Okay, there we go.
So they're supposed to be wiser, but that's not always the case.
Oh, okay, understood. There we go. Great answer. Love it. So a little bit more about the state, and this is something that I really love, is who represents me. And we have a demonstration, but the library's internet is quite slow this morning, so I'm not going to do it. But if you just Google who represents me, you can put in your address, if you'd like to be that specific, and see who each of the people are that represent you. So it goes from, and it starts with state, so it goes from your state representative, but it even has like your higher education coordinating board member. It goes all the way through a long list of people who are elected to represent you where you live. And then I think ends with, I think Ronnie Jackson is also on there, so it does have our U.S. Senators and representatives on there as well. But that's a great tool and resource, especially if you're talking to someone who maybe you all know who represents you, or if you want more information about it. But if you're talking to someone who's maybe a new voter, a younger person, and they don't actually know who represents them, great tool to direct them to in order for them to see who it is that represents them. More about the state, we have several statewide elected officials. They are called the plural executive. So these are people who are elected to office in a statewide election. So you've got the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, controller of public accounts. Then you have the agriculture commissioner, the land commissioner, and then we have 3 railroad commissioners. And so this is a little different too, that these commissioners are elected in a statewide election. But they are responsible for certain state agencies. So like the agriculture commissioner is responsible for the Texas Department of Agriculture. Though there are some people for other boards and commissions, which we'll talk about in a moment, where they have appointed officials rather than elected. But they are the plural executive. Each one of these offices does act independently of the other, and the cost to file for candidacy for that statewide office is $3,750. So if you're considering it, that's the first fee. Of course, we're not counting all of the money you need in order to be elected to run a campaign. This is just a filing fee. Yes, ma'am, Claudia.
I was going to point out that this plural executive is comparable to all the offices that are elected in county government.
Mm-hmm.
That's considered plural executive because each of them are independent of one another.
Right. And
then, framers of the 1876 Constitution were skeptical of government. They were reacting to Reconstruction, and so they made sure that nobody had all the power. They divided the power consistently throughout Texas government.
And something else to note that is different, or at least whenever I talk to people who maybe are not as in tune with state and local government as I am, which is many people, but they sometimes don't realize that the governor and lieutenant governor do not run on a ticket. So they are elected independently of each other and could conceivably be from different parties even. That can happen if it ever did. It can happen, which is different than our federal elections, like the president and vice president. They're on a ticket. So it's different here, where your governor and lieutenant governor truly are independent offices. Just a reminder about that. So the Speaker of the House is the person who runs, the House in Texas, and they are elected first in the district which they represent, right? But then to become the Speaker, they have to be elected by their fellow House members, just like the United States House of Representatives. Now, the President of the Senate, again, much like our United States federal government, the Lieutenant Governor, who is elected statewide, serves as the President of the Senate, right? It's the same sort of thing. So our state representatives, senators, the Speaker of the House, and the Lieutenant Governor are paid a salary of $7,200 per year, and they are given a per diem of $221 per day while they're in session. A session lasts 140 days and is held every other year. A new law was passed in the last several years, saying that campaign funds can be used for their living expenses while they are in session.
Isn't that outrageous?
So what that means is, if $221 per day is not enough for their per diem, for their housing, their utilities, their food, all of that stuff, then they can indeed use their campaign funds and contributions in order to make up whatever money they whatever money they need. The sessions are every other year. Special sessions can only be called by the governor. It is his right to call those special sessions, and he determines the topic for the session. In some cases, you can just have session after session after session, depending on if the business the government or the governor intended to be taken care of gets taken care of. And those special sessions are for a limited amount of time, so 30 days. But you can call one for 30 days. The governor can, and then if that business is not taken care of, he can call another one with the same topic.
That's what he's doing.
And
We're
that-
in one
yeah.
right now that ends this next week.
Right.
And then he's gonna call another one.
Right, because there's a big hot topic in our state government right now that's being considered. And so, yes, that is a thing we are in right now. And those sessions are every other year, but they occur in odd-numbered years. So we just ended a session in May of this year, and now we're in a special session right now. And they can just keep being called for as long as they want, or as long as the governor would like them to be called. For our state representatives and senators, their elections are partisan again, and they are in single-member districts. So the person who is running must live in the area to which they want to be represented or elected, to represent. And there's a filing fee for those state reps, which is $750, and senators is $1,250. Those are just the filing fee. Again, not the amount of money it takes to actually run a campaign. It's just filing fees. But they do have to live in that district that they are elected to represent. We do have redistricting every 10 years along with apportionment, and I believe we have that on another slide. Usually this coincides with the census because the people are counted again. And once the people are counted again, we must make sure that our senators and representatives are representing an equal number of people, not equal to themselves, but equal to the rest of the people in their the senators and representatives. Primary elections are held in March of even-numbered years. If necessary, runoff elections are in May of that same year, and then the general election is held in November of the even-numbered year. So it makes sense, right? The elections are in even-numbered years, the sessions are in odd-numbered years, and it just. Yeah, go ahead, Claudia.
My students never understand what a primary election is for, and it's just to choose candidates. Each party chooses their candidates in a primary election. And then it's in the general election that whoever won those spots in the primary election will then face the other party in the general election.
Right. So that's how we whittle down our candidate list from the primary to the general. We do have over 200 state agencies, boards, and commissions. The governor does appoint those people. And some of the examples that I put on here are the Texas Transportation Commission. So that is the commission that is sort of the oversight and governing body, we can say, of the Texas Department of Transportation. So they're the ones that approve contracts for, large road projects. They're the ones that approve grants for public transportation and things like that. And then, of course, it keeps going on. But the Texas Parks and Wildlife Commission is one of those that everyone wants to be on. Interestingly enough, the chairman of that commission right now is, he's the owner of Buc-ee's. I think his nickname is something about Buc-ee. Beaver. Thank you. That's right, Beaver. And his first name's Alvin, and he's a cool guy, it seems. But he's the chairman of the Parks and Wildlife Commission. And then, of course, your University Board of Regents, they are all appointed by the governor. Health and Human Services Commission, one that's near and dear to my heart. I am a historian by training. I wasn't always a city manager. I'm not a city manager anymore. I'm a historian now. Is the Texas Historical Commission. Of course, we've got the Governor's Commission for Women, the Public Safety Commission, Lottery Commission, and then Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission. There are many, many, many more, and this is just a small sampling of those over 200 agencies that are out there. But again, the governor does appoint those members, and traditionally it seems, you can send him an email or call him and tell him you want to be appointed, but a lot of times people who donate a lot to his campaign get added to those commissions. That's, you know, that's just how politics work. That's how it goes. So how to get involved with our state government. You can email, call, or text your state legislator. You can make a public comment on a bill or resolution in Austin. You can also attend a state board or commission meeting. So those boards and commissions we talked about, they touch on things that you probably interact with in your everyday life. So maybe it's Parks and Wildlife, so you go to Palo Duro Canyon often. Maybe you play the lottery. Those are things that you interact with all the time. Maybe you're a public transit user, right? And so you can actually attend one of those meetings. Almost all of them, they do broadcast online using either a live streaming platform or Zoom or something like that. If you just go to the website for that department, you can find information about how to attend a meeting. And those are really good because you can see sort of the business of the state as it, as it works all across the, the business of that commission as it goes across the state. That's a really good resource, I think, for trying to get involved with those boards and commissions that maybe touch your everyday life. You can also run for office. You can, of course, the ultimate is vote in an election, right? And then you can also ask to be appointed to one of those state boards or commissions, but you'll have to call the governor for that. So, yeah, that's could be a challenge, but,
I wanted to point out that among those over 200 boards and commissions are boards that have to do with occupations and professions.
Yes.
Everything from a cosmetologist to a psychologist to a teacher. I don't think we realize how many careers, professions are controlled by the state government.
Yeah, the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, TDLR, they're the ones that they have oversight over many of those licenses. But then there's like a state plumbing board, there's an electrician's board that they also do, they have control over some of the licensing requirements you need for some of those occupations as well. Yeah, there's a veterinary board. Yeah, there's many of them. Yeah, yeah.
My students are always
Yeah.
saying, why do I need to study government?
This is
And I said,
why.
because in 99% of the cases, they control the career or profession or field that you're in. And I make them write papers on it, and then they're just shocked.
Yeah, yeah. It's a big deal. I mean, county government may be the one that's the closest to you, but some of these things, these state boards and commissions can also, control parts of your profession. You're right. You're right. So special districts, these are very interesting. So they're called special purpose districts or special districts. They are generally funded by a property tax or an assessment, and they are governed by the Texas Administrative Code. Now, there are several examples. One is the hospital districts. You may have heard of the, what was it called? The hospital district here in town?
It's the Potter Randall Hospital.
Hospital district, right. Which, no, it still exists. But you will not see it on your tax bill. I'm surprised we didn't have a question about it. Normally we get a question about that when we look at the tax bill. The sale of the old hospital funded that board until 2031. So you won't see that come up on your tax bill again until 2031. So they have suspended
And then it'll go back
taxes
on
for
your
now.
tax bill.
Yeah. Yeah, so the sale of that hospital actually improve your property tax bill for several years. But then you also have water conservation districts, which are concerned with the conservation of our groundwater, which, we're very dependent on in the state of Texas, particularly up here in our area. You have community college districts, so that's the Amarillo Junior College. They have a board of directors. There's public improvement districts, which are very interesting too. They are different from a homeowners association or a property owners association, and I like to talk about them because sometimes people don't know they even live in one. So several of them that are actually on your on the handout that has all the boards and commissions are like the Vineyards has a public improvement district, the Greenways has one, the Colonies has one. So these are districts that are set up whenever that property is being developed. And they can, normally they are funded by an assessment, and that assessment goes along with your property tax bill, but that assessment is intended to improve the area in which you live. So like, I think the Vineyards has a flat fee of, it's either $100 or $50 or something like that per year. But the Colonies has an assessment that is by the square footage of your lot, not your home, your lot. So depending on how big your lot is, you pay a certain amount per square foot in assessment. Now that assessment is used to pay for the utilities for maintaining the grass and the green spaces. It's used to maintain the sidewalks, the landscaping, to put up the Christmas lights whenever the Christmas lights go up. That sort of stuff is what those assessments are used for. They are also put on a separate street and paving improvement plan than the regular city. So like my neighborhood, I'm not inside a public improvement district. I'm on the regular city's pavement schedule. The people in these neighborhoods are on their own plan. They're on their own plan, and they usually get those services faster because they pay for it, right? They pay an extra assessment for it. They do have a board. It is appointed by the city council, and you do have to live in that neighborhood to be appointed to the board. I believe there's usually 3 members. They have a 5-year plan and a budget. So all of that is public record. All of that is, they have public meetings just like the rest of the boards and commissions. So if you didn't know you lived in a public improvement district, or if you're curious if you do, consult that list of boards and commissions and you'll see if you are or not. Traditionally, it's probably, I think the Greenways was the first one in town. So if you live in a neighborhood newer than the Greenways, you might be. But if you're in a neighborhood older than the Greenways, you're probably not. It just depends. But more information about that can also be found on the city's website about like who is on that board, when they meet, that kind of stuff is there. You also have municipal utility districts, and then down in the larger cities, you've got toll roads, which are another special district that collects property taxes or in some cases assessments. There are indeed more special districts than there are counties, cities, school districts combined. They are all over the place. There are so many of them. And these are just an example list. There are more than just these several. There are also in larger cities, particularly where, well, not larger cities, but where you have communities maybe of suburbs of large cities, they create things called emergency services districts. So instead of 4 very small cities who maybe have a small tax base maintaining a police department, you can have 1 police department, or you can have 1 fire department, or 1 ambulance service that serves all 4 of those cities. And they do that through an emergency services district, which also has intergovernmental contracts for, response, mutual aid agreements is what they're called, for other, close by places. But an emergency services district, again, is an extra tax that the people who live there pay in order to get those services. It's very useful when you have a city who's, as I said, very small and can't maintain a fire department because they are so small, and they can pool their resources together into one of those districts. And those are very popular down in the larger cities. Yes, go ahead.
Is Amarillo's TIR, T-I-R?
Yes, that's a special district. Yes, the TIRS, the tax investment, what is it? Tax increment reinvestment zone, I think is how it's said. Yes, that's a special district as well. Yes. And those are even more complicated, and I don't know much about them because I've never had experience with them. But that's another one that if you contact someone involved in that at the city, they can definitely give you more information about. Probably city planning, or even if you want to talk to the interim city manager, Andrew Freeman, super approachable guy, really nice. He can give you more information about that as well. Yeah, let me go back. Go ahead.
What about special districts that extend well beyond the city limits, like a water conservation district? Who pulls the trigger on creating those, determining the geography and the makeup of the district management?
So that is decided by the voters in that district. So the groundwater conservation districts are pretty old. I don't know how they were originally set up. I don't know how you set up a new one. Let me be clear. But whenever you go to the polls, if you live in one of those districts, those are elected by the voters in their district, in that geography. So a good example is I worked in the village of Timber Creek Canyon in Randall County. They are not within a water conservation district. And because they are not in a water conservation district, and I believe it came to a vote and they did not want to be part of it whenever it was set up, I think maybe that's how it was, they do not have the regulations that you get from a water conservation district. So if you own land in one of those districts, and you have a well, they do have like a special monitoring that they want you to do. They want you to report how many gallons you've pumped, because we're trying to work on conserving our groundwater. Now, it's not a regulation, it's just we'd love for you to report it. Or we've got they provide leak monitors to people so that you can make sure that your lines aren't leaking, things like that for farmers and other agricultural operations. But like the groundwater conservation district, I don't remember how they were set up, as I said. It's written in statute how they're made. So if you Google that, I'm sure you can find it. But other special districts, so like a public improvement district, that comes from the developer. So whoever's developing the land would like to set up a public improvement district, and then they sit on the board whenever it's first made. Hospital districts, I don't know how those are set up. There's different rules for each kind. And all of those are set out in state statute. You can find those in the Texas Administrative Code. There's several sections.
Some districts require that there be some ex officio members. like
Yes.
County commissioners
Yes.
and city council on them in addition to other people. But there are mosquito districts and fire districts.
And weed control districts, that's
Yeah,
another
I mean,
noxious
there's every kind of
weeds.
district you can think of. You
Yeah.
get down by the coast, and there's all kinds of districts that we never heard of.
Like a port authority is a special district, so like they'll have that in Houston and right down on the coast where they have ports, things like that too. Transit, there can be transit districts also that are special districts too, where they collect. I can't remember how those are made either, but there are special transit districts. So like I think that in Fort Worth they've got the the Trinity, the rail line that they have there. I think that's a special district too.
And metropolitan transit, like in Houston and
Yep.
Dallas,
Yep.
are special districts.
Yes.
There's just layers and layers and layers of government that's not centralized.
Right.
We have the most decentralized governmental program in the United States. There's just nobody in charge.
Certainly how it feels.
Change that.
Yeah.
They do. So how to get involved with these districts? You can attend a meeting. You can check the newspaper for upcoming meeting notices. They do have to post those, I believe, in the newspaper, and then I think they have to post them online depending on what district they are and where they are affiliated. So if it's a district created under the city's umbrella, all of that runs through the city. If they're a groundwater conservation district, they should have their own website, their own social media, all of that stuff as well. You can make a public comment at one of those, meetings. In some cases, you can run for office, as with the groundwater conservation district. Those are elected positions, or you can apply for appointment to a special district. In the case if it's a city or a county special district, it's under their umbrella of governance. And of course, some positions are appointed by the city or county. So a bit about sales tax, and then we've got another icebreaker. So just so you're aware, if you weren't already aware, Texas has a state sales tax that is capped at 6.25%. So that's how much of your sales tax goes to the state of Texas, all right? Then a local government can impose up to 2% additional sales tax, which means that in most cases where you are buying things, your sales tax is capped at 8.25%. That's why you see that on your bill, or on your receipt, I should say. And that 2% can be used for many different things, including economic development, municipal services, in some cases to provide state services. That just depends on the county or the city in which you live, or you are buying things, I should say. And then property tax relief. If you turn back to your property tax bill and you look at the Potter County bill, it says, this is the bottom one. Just under where you see taxing entities, there's a little star, and it says, additional city sales tax reduced your city ad valorem tax by $67. So in this case, for this person, for this home, there was additional city sales tax that was collected. That's part of that 2% that you see on the slide that was used to decrease the property tax bill that you see in front of you. So the city of Amarillo does have part of their 2% allocated to property tax relief, which many cities do, particularly larger cities. I believe the city of Canyon does it too, yes.
The 8.25 is among the highest sales tax rates in the United States.
Yep.
And it's because Texas is the only major state that does not have an income tax.
Yep. Yeah, and there is a way to see. So like, if you would like to see, if you live in Randall County, if you'd like to see where which parts of that the 2% that the local government can impose, if you'd like to see how that is broken down, because sometimes it's by 0.5%, like it gets slivered out for different things. If you'd like to see that, the Controller of Public Accounts for the state of Texas has a database where you can type in the county in which you're buying something, and then you can see a breakdown of each of those things. So I believe the city uses maybe 0.5% for economic development, maybe 0.5% for property tax relief, and then the other 1% that's left is broken down for other things. Yes.
Is it easy to describe the things that it cannot be used for?
Yes, anything outside of this. So, which is hard because municipal services is huge. So traditionally, economic development is one that they always use it for. And what that means is that helps to fund the Economic Development Corporation and to fund those agreements that they make for, they'll fund $500,000 for this project or whatever it is. And then property tax relief, of course. No, it's, okay, I said it was, no, it's not. It's very hard to tell you what they cannot use sales tax for. Interestingly, though, the sales tax does get collected and goes through the state and then back to the city or the county. It sort of makes this loop, and so the state actually distributes all of that money out to the entities. Yeah, that's a little bit about sales tax. Okay, I have one more prize. It's our last icebreaker, and you can't answer, unfortunately. I'm sorry. You can't either, because you already know. Okay. And you already won. I need to be back at the mic, sorry. Can anyone name for me either the Potter or Randall County Elections Administrator? What their name is? There are two people. One is with us, the other is not. Do you know it?
Well, I know it, but.
No, behind you.
I
Do you know it?
Well, yeah, but I work in elections.
Okay. Okay. You could still get it and then give it to someone if you want. Because I have one more prize left. Do you want to answer and then give it to someone?
Chrissy Bates?
Okay, that's one. She's here with us. So you want to give it to her? Here. You can pass that back to her. Awesome. Does anyone know Randall County? Shannon Leckie. Thank you very much. Yes, so that's the Potter and Randall County Elections Administrators. Thank you so much for being here today. Now we're getting into the election slides, and we, to make this part of our presentation, we consulted both Shannon and Christy to get their expert opinion so that we knew that we were giving you the correct and true information. So, if anything seems amiss, or if you'd like to chime in, please do, okay? Because we rely on our subject matter experts for this kind of stuff. So, we begin by talking about how the U.S. Constitution gives the states the primary authority for conducting elections. And then the state of Texas has delegated that duty down to our counties, and that is true for all of our counties. And elections can be run either by the elections administrator, who's appointed by the County Election Commission, and that election commission is made up of our county judge, our county clerk, county tax assessor collector, and then the county chair of each of the political parties. So that is who appoints the elections administrator. In the absence of an election administrator, a county clerk or county tax assessor does also have the authority to run an election. But in most cases, you have an elections administrator, I think. But in their absence, you have the other two. Elections are held to elect our officials in local, state, and federal government, but as well, they are used to decide other issues like taxation, regulation, or constitutional amendments. And in some cases, that regulation is in the constitutional amendments, as we have in front of us today for our next upcoming election on Tuesday. So state and federal elections, which are also coincide with the county, their primary is in March. They have a runoff, if necessary, in May for that primary election. And then their general election is in November, and those are all in even-numbered years. Their local elections, which can be for city, the school, general elections, that stuff, right? The school is also with the city. They're in odd-numbered years, and they're held in May, and that's pretty traditional. And then our constitutional elections are held in November, and they are in odd-numbered years. So in your odd-numbered year, you can have a constitutional election, which makes sense, right? Because in the spring of the odd-numbered year, the legislature met, right? And so coming out of that, they have constitutional amendments that are proposed to be on the ballot. Those then get on the ballot and are held in the election in an odd-numbered year in November. But then the officials are actually elected in the even-numbered years. Yes, go ahead, Sonia.
There are occasionally deviations from this schedule.
Sure.
For example, the city of Houston is having their mayoral
Mhm.
Right
and
now.
city council race
Right.
in November
Right.
instead of in May. So there
Right.
are occasionally, this is a general rule, but
Mhm.
Yeah,
occasionally.
it's authorized in the Constitution, those additional months, and November's one
Right.
of them for cities.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
they're having quite a race down there. It's fascinating.
Yes, so there are deviations, of course, but traditionally, this is the schedule that these elections follow. So these are the different things that you have to meet in order to be eligible to vote. An interesting thing that we have been talking about is that you have to be at least 17 years and 10 months of age, or if you are 18 years of age on election day. So if you have someone in your family or who's close to you who is going to be close to 18, the cutoff for the registration to vote was October 7th, right? 30 days before the election? Or is it 30 days before early voting starts?
Before election day.
Before election day. So it's 30 days before election day, so it's too late. But if they did get registered and they do meet those requirements, then fantastic. And something else that we talked about with our voter deputy registrars here were that you can't be a convicted felon. But in Texas, we're a little bit unique because if the person's sentenced, their probation, their parole, and all of that stuff, and all of their court costs are paid, they do regain that eligibility. But we did have a question, and I'd like to ask you, because this came up last time. How is that information audited to make sure that if they are a convicted felon, but all of this has been done? Like, how is that checked, was the question?
Well, there are checks in the
Mhm.
state because we get court information.
Mhm.
Like if someone goes through the court system
Mhm.
and they're, I guess, prosecuted and they're,
Mhm.
deemed as a felon or whatever.
Sure.
So we get those, and so we send exams
Mm-hmm.
on those, and an exam is a letter saying, okay, can you, in essence, prove that, you're not this person, you weren't
Okay.
convicted of a felon.
Okay.
And so we do that, and
Mhm.
very few times
Mm-hmm.
have we ever had anybody ever say that, no,
Mhm.
this is not me.
Right.
Most of the time, all the information that we get from the courts is true and
Right.
correct.
Right.
And so we would, cancel that person's voter
Mhm.
registration.
Sure.
And so there's just different checks and balances, even through the state.
Okay.
That we get.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
the League of Women Voters
Mhm.
was a major player in
Mhm.
getting that passed,
Mm-hmm.
where felons could vote after they had completed all the requirements.
Right, and you can read the rest of them, the rest of the stipulations there. Those are also, I'm sure, on the Secretary of State's website and both of the county registrar websites as well. So moving on, we do have open primaries in Texas, which means that you can choose which ballot you prefer, so Republican or Democratic, depending. And then, of course, third party, the third party or independent, well, not independent, but the third party primaries are done by caucus, so they don't actually have an election or a primary election for those. But they do have to keep their party affiliation through the runoff. So if you decide to vote in the Republican primary and there's a runoff for the candidates for that election, then you'll have to keep that same party for the primary. But it does not have any bearing on how you vote in November at the general election. You can vote for whoever you want. Just to be clear, whoever you want. We did get some statistics on voter participation in Texas, and we really are near the bottom. Less than half of registered voters in Texas voted in 2016 and 2018. And then we also rank 49th out of 50 in voting in presidential elections and 47th out of 50 in non-presidential general elections. So we are very near the bottom. There's many reasons for that, but one of the reasons that we're having this seminar is to encourage you all to vote. Yes.
I was
Yes,
just
go
gonna
ahead.
mention that a lot of people don't know if they don't vote in the primary,
Mhm.
they are eligible to vote in the runoff.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. So yeah, I didn't think about that. So yeah, even if you don't vote in the primary, you still can vote in the runoff election. Perfect. Okay, great. I'm going to add that. That's a great note to have as well. So apportionment and redistricting is very important for this process as well, because apportionment occurs after you have a census, and that's in order to determine the state's population and how many congressional seats we have. And also redistricting happens after apportionment, after all of the levels are equalized, within a certain margin. But the redistricting redraws all of our lines to make sure that they have essentially those same number of persons that are represented. An important note, no, I already made that note earlier when I was talking about senators and U.S. congressmen. So we can move on from that one. So where to vote? Some counties in Texas do require precinct voting, but Potter and Randall County do have voting centers. You want to always check with your elections administrator or a trusted source. I believe the League of Women Voters Guides do have that information. But also ensure that you understand that early voting polling places may not be the same as election day places. In many cases they are, but they may not be. So just double check when you're going to vote that you know where your voting center is, or where a voting center that you can vote at is. Early voting and voting by mail. Claudia provided a statistic that 72% of all of votes in 2018 were actually cast during either early voting or by mail. And early voting does have a very specific set of days. It does begin the 17th day before the election and ends the 4th day before the election. And voting by mail is very interesting as well in the state of Texas. So if you're away from the county on election day, or if you are sick or disabled, or if you're 65 years or older, you make an application to vote by mail. And that is a yearly application, right? Go ahead.
It can be an annual,
Mhm.
if you check the box for annual.
Oh,
it
okay.
can be.
Okay.
Otherwise, if you check a box for an individual, if you're
Uh-huh.
out of the county, it
Uh-huh.
can be an annual.
Okay.
But also, you can, if you're not 65
Mhm.
or older, sick or disabled,
Mhm.
and you're out of the county,
Mhm.
it has to be you can't be in the county during early voting, so you have to be
Oh,
out
okay.
of the county during early voting and election.
And election day, it's both. Okay, perfect. So whenever you make that application, you do have to do that annually if you are 65 and older or sick or disabled, right?
It doesn't have to be annual, but it's beginning January 1st,
Uh-huh.
you can make an application. If you
Okay.
want to vote all year, you can,
Mhm.
present an annual application
Okay,
and have a ballot for every election that year. One application will cover it.
right. But then the next year you have to refile
Yes,
another
yes,
one.
that's why
Yeah.
they're annual applications.
They're annual
Yes.
applications.
Yeah,
Yes, go ahead,
I'd
Claudia.
like to point out that I think that that's unconstitutional.
I didn't make the law.
I know you didn't.
Yeah, we know.
The legislature did. And when you fill out a card to register to vote, it's very simple, it's small, and you're registered forever until you move.
Well, until your voter registration is canceled because you
Mhm.
failed to, or until you move.
Until
Mhm.
you move. But voting by mail, you have to register every year.
Mhm.
That is not constitutional. And secondly, all the information they ask you on that application is more than they ask you on that little card. And I just keep waiting for somebody to file a law. I tell my students, nothing gets changed because it's wrong. A lawsuit has to be filed.
Right. And of course, our voter registrar, our not voter registrars, our elections administrators, they've got laws that they have to follow, and that's just how it
Yeah,
is
no,
for
I
now.
know, I wouldn't
Yeah.
fuss it at her.
No, absolutely. Hold on one second, Sonia. Yes, back there.
When I vote by mail.
Uh-huh.
because I'm old.
Yes, sure.
And when I sign, it says, you have to put your ballot in
Mhm.
one envelope,
Mhm.
put that in another
Mhm.
envelope, and fill out something before you seal the
Mhm.
last envelope, and then you have to sign it
Mhm.
and put some other numbers
Mhm.
on it. When I signed mine, I just signed my usual signature, and
Mhm.
I thought, I wonder if I was supposed to put my middle name in there. They have it on the.
Oh, right.
So I stuck it on at the end with an arrow.
Oh.
Are they gonna use my ballot?
I don't know. We've got the expert to tell you.
Generally,
Uh-huh.
however you sign your name.
Why don't
how
you
you-
turn around with that?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I have wheels, I can. Generally, however you sign your name is acceptable, okay? So, first there's an application. You fill out your application, you sign your application, and so it's, the signature on the application, does it match, reasonably with the signature on the ballot envelope,
Mm.
which you put your ballot in? And so, if your name is, Amanda, Catherine, whatever, and you don't, that's not how you normally would sign your name. If it's just Amanda Jones, just sign your name normal do it on the application the same way, do it on the ballot envelope the same
What
way.
if you don't remember?
Mm.
That's her
Some
problem.
people don't, but the ballot board makes those decisions, and so
Ah.
they will look, and so if Amanda looks the same, Amanda signed here the same, signed here the same, Jones is signed, there, you know, it's not like, let's get out the microscope and make sure every stroke is the same. But, because we have seen where, maybe an applicant or maybe a spouse or a child or a parent has signed one and the other one has signed the other, and there's considerable differences there.
Yeah.
You can tell the difference. So it's not like we're really microscoping your signature, but we wanna make sure that it's that you that signed it and not someone else that did it.
Yeah. So what's within reason? So probably you were okay, I would bet.
And yeah, I'm sure she was fine.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome.
Oh, I did wanna say one
Go
more
ahead,
thing.
go ahead.
Potter County is obviously vote centers
Mhm.
like Randall.
Mhm.
All of our 5 early voting sites are our election day sites.
Okay, perfect.
However, I think News Channel 10 came out yesterday about the library doing, some reconstruction, they have some projects, and we had several phone calls. People think that we're gonna be closed on election day. We are not.
No, okay.
So the library starts their renovations on Monday, but election day will still happen on Tuesday.
Okay, perfect. Good, good, good. Yes, go ahead, Sonia.
And Katie, I wanted to mention in response a little bit to what Claudia pointed out, Texas is not one of the states that makes it easy to register to vote and vote. So 40 states, for example, have online voter registration and Texas does not. Texas puts significant hoops for you to jump through to register and to vote. But one of the good things Texas has done is allow for vote centers, which is where you can vote at any of these locations during early voting or election day, whatever's convenient for you, and you don't have to drive to your precinct to vote in your precinct. Now, there are those folks who would like to see us do away with vote centers, and so be watching for that to come up in your counties, and if you feel that vote centers are a good thing, be sure and go and tell your county commissioners how you feel about those vote centers.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonia, for bringing that up. That is absolutely important.
Why do they wanna do away with those?
They wanna make it harder to vote. Texas is one of the states that is considered difficult to vote in, and it's reflected in our low voting participation.
So a note about safety and security of our elections, which I know has been another one of those topics that's been in the news. Maybe you've heard about it. Another thing that we consulted our elections administrators about. So we just want to point out that our election judges, both your presiding and alternate, they have, if you've been to vote at the polls recently, the process is a little different, right? Instead of just getting your number and walking up to your machine and doing your voting and everything's done, you actually also get a paper that you feed into the machine, it prints something out, and then you take it over and you put it into the scanner. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. These people, the election judges, your presiding and alternates, they are the ones who are in charge at the voting center of taking the scanner, the paper votes, the tabulator pads, all of that stuff to your central voting center when the voting center or the voting period has closed. Now, state law does require that you have a law enforcement officer. I'm assuming it's usually a county deputy or maybe an off-duty APD officer who's on duty for, as an extra gig sort of thing. That would be the person who has to be at the voting headquarters, again, to ensure security and safety. But then state law also requires in counties with over 100,000 people in population to have live cameras in the voting areas at the central voting headquarters while the tallying process is going on. And both Potter and Randall County have that, as I understand, because we do meet that threshold. So the tabulator pad has the number of voters who signed in, and that number is matched against the number of scanned votes to make sure that that tabulation was correct, which makes a lot of sense to me. That's why we have that extra step of scanning the paper. It freaked me out a little bit when I first did it because it was new and it was different, but it's okay. I understand now the reason for it. It makes a little bit more sense. And then also mail-in and early votes are counted first, and then you add the election day votes to that tabulation, and then you get your full count at the end. Any questions about that? Yeah, go ahead, Claudia.
Well, we have a lot of doubters now who think our elections are rigged.
Right.
And would be very hard to rig an election with this kind of system. I don't know where they get that idea. I think they don't know about this process. And frankly, I was unclear about this process until we talked to both you and Shannon. But it's, you know, having the law enforcement there and the cameras going, and the two people, it takes two people to bring the stuff in, from the voting locations. I feel very comfortable that we have secure elections.
Well, that's Texas, right? Or is that
Right.
also?
No, that's Texas.
Texas. No, I can't speak for any other state, but Texas has, I believe, very secure. Well, and I was, and Jen is an election judge.
Yeah, with Potter County, I work as an election judge, and I would say Potter County in specific, that's where my experience is, and it's run so well. And for people who express doubts and opinions about that, my response is always, have you volunteered or have you tried it? Because in working the elections, I'm amazed. It is run, at least in this county, Potter County, it's run so well. Like even when we bring stuff back to Central County, the specific things are split up between the judge and co-judge, so that if something happened, not all of this stuff is with one person, for example. I mean, it's really well run.
And you know, at the voting sites, it's usually people my age, running the elections, and you can't get a thing over them. I mean, they would fall on the sword before they let you vote if it doesn't match up.
Yes.
One more thing, I don't know if you're covering this later or not, but I think the biggest misconception about elections is when they say they're rigged, is that, we want everyone to know that there isn't any part of the voting machines at all that's connected to the internet.
That's right.
And so, I mean, they say they're gonna get hacked, well, they're not connected to the internet. The only thing that communicates via Wi-Fi is your voter check-in, is when you check in, and that is so that it prevents you from voting here and then running across town and voting somewhere else. Because they communicate, they tell who checked in to vote, and that's it.
Well, and as you said, right, it's the check-in that actually can communicate via some internet connection, some network connection, but the scanner doesn't. So the scanner, using that to cross-check the pad makes sense, right?
Yes.
Because how can both things be hacked, as we say? Yeah.
Not even the tabulation system
Right.
in our office is connected
Right.
to the internet.
Right. Which makes me definitely feel more safe, specifically with cybersecurity concerns and things like that. So I appreciate that. All right, so we have our elections administrators do hire persons in the following positions. So you've got election clerks, right? You've got election judges, you've got presiding and alternate. And we were told, and I think it's right, Michelle told us last time, that you can be hired to be an election clerk, not a judge, but a clerk, at 16, right? As young as 16.
Yes, if you're a student, you need permission
From your school.
From your school
Yeah.
and your parents.
Right. But that is something, and you can get that absence excused from school depending on the district, which is great. I'm definitely going to try to get my son to do this. I think he needs to be involved in elections early. It's so cool that 2 years before you're eligible to vote, you can be hired to work an election and actually see it firsthand. That's so cool. Also, I'd love to get someone. I would do it if I had more available time, but. Getting him to do it would be cool, so there's not people such as Claudia there all the time, as you just said, Claudia. But it really helps with, understanding the way that the process works, being more comfortable with going to vote, and I think that's just great. I do think that it's preferred that you serve as an election clerk for several elections before you become a judge. And then there are other positions that are not hired by elections administrators, including a poll watcher. That is a volunteer position only, and they can be selected by a candidate, a party, or a political action committee to be at a poll to essentially watch what's going on. And are those fairly new? Are they new? Yeah? No, they've been around forever? Okay. I think I just have been more recently, I think I've heard about them more recently, more than anything.
There's more,
More of them?
yes, more.
Understood.
More and more.
Okay.
per election.
And then there are your elections administrators' information. There's Christy and then Shannon and their phone numbers if you'd like more information as well. You can also get their information, more information on their websites, which I believe are, they get updated for every election and have some great information and knowledge resources there as well. How to get involved? Of course, you can become a volunteer deputy registrar, as many people in the league are. You can apply to work at an election site. I know I said election judge, but I mean an election worker, so a clerk or after you've done that, a judge. And then you can volunteer to be a poll watcher as well for a political party candidate or political action committee. And we're almost done with our slides today. We'll get out a little bit early, unless there are more questions, but please, as many questions as you have. Ways to get more information, you can visit Vote 411. That's a great resource that is a league resource. You can check our voters guides. You can also look out whenever there are candidates, their websites. We hold candidate forums. I know many other entities across the state hold other candidate forums. There's the Take Action page, which is another league page, I believe, where you can, if there's a specific issue that is near and dear to your heart, and you would like to, send an email with information about why it's affecting you or how it's affecting you, you can send that to your elected representative. I know that we talked about several sessions ago, many of those elected representatives, be it your Amarillo City Council, your Potter or Randall County Commissioners, all the way up to Ronnie Jackson, they really prefer that you tell them your personal story, because that's something that they can use when they are talking to their colleagues. Then when they're talking to people, talking to their constituents, they can use those stories and how this issue affects you personally in order to try to lobby, on your behalf. And it's something that's really important, is to give them that personal touch, and it's a very important thing. We also have our League of Women Voters Facebook page. Of course, this is a league program, so we've got a lot of resources. Yes, do you have something? Go ahead.
In addition to Vote
Uh-huh.
411 and League of Women Voters, I use
Uh-huh.
those too, but sometimes I also use Ballotopedia.
Okay.
Especially if it's a case where you have candidates who may not have answered questions for League of Women Voters, there
Okay.
may be some information on Ballotopedia.
Ballotopedia, okay. Another resource we'll add to our slide. Very good, very good. And then, of course, like if it's a constitutional amendment election, there's lots of people who have a lot of information about those. But also the Secretary of State's website has the actual language of each one of those amendments as well. All right, so we've got one more slide, and that is who our federal elected officials are. Thank you. You said Ronnie Jackson earlier. Yes, District 13 Congressman. And then we have two senators, Ted Cruz and John Cornyn. We're not covering our federal government in this presentation and slides today, but we wanted to mention who these people are as well, since they are connected to you in some way. Go ahead, Sonia.
I'd like to point out that of all the elected officials you have seen on the slides today, we had two women, Nancy Tanner and Christy Dyer, Park County judges, and they're wonderful representatives for us. I would encourage all women to think about running for office so that our elected representatives in the Panhandle area more closely represent
The
our
population, trying.
And really, we are lower than we should be compared to other areas of the state and country in terms of number of women that are representing us. So that's just an encouragement, and you start by serving on boards and commissions and volunteering for various things.
Absolutely.
And the other reason for showing these federal officials is that people get state representatives and federal representatives confused, and state senators and US senators confused. And so it's always good to distinguish between the two.
So with that, this is the end of our presentation today. Yes, please, it's question time.
Watchers actually do.
I think they just watch.
Can you restate the question?
Yeah, what do poll watchers do? I believe they just watch, but Christy's probably got a good answer for that.
They make sure that we are following the law. Okay. And so there's also state inspectors.
Right.
Almost for every election, the state, has people that come down, or people that are disappointed. They can call and say, I wanna be a state watcher, state inspector. And so state inspectors come in almost every time to our elections, and they make sure that we are following, our workers have on name badges, we're assisting voters in the correct way. We're following all the procedures, and then they give a report. They have a checklist, and they give a report to the state, and then we get a report. And poll watchers basically do the same thing, but they do it for a party, a candidate, or a PAC.
So state inspectors come in from the state, and they are an official inspection inspector. And then the poll watchers are a more informal watching entity that's from a political party, a state, or a candidate.
No, we've had poll watchers for.
And it's not new.
We haven't had poll watchers very much, but recently they're becoming more evident, Yes.
My concern volunteer and wanna be there and watch.
Yes,
I have
they,
one.
and they have to be appointed
Right.
by someone. They can't just say, I wanna volunteer. They can't just show up in your polling site and say, here I am, I wanna watch. That's not allowed.
So and we've got one more, if there's no more questions, just for the moment, there's one more thing. Claudia is going to start handing out our assessment forms, our feedback forms.
We only have like 4.
Oh, we only have 4?
We're gonna pick them up.
Oh, okay. Well, if you have them, perfect. But if you need one, please let Michelle know. If you would fill those out too, so we can get some feedback to improve our presentation, to make sure that we're getting the information out that you might need, or that you think is important to you. We'd like to really touch on that stuff in our coming presentations. But are there any other questions as we're wrapping up here? Yes, go ahead.
In general,
Yeah.
how does Texas government compare with other states?
How does Texas government compare with other states?
Is it generally viewed positively, negatively, like the single-member district?
Oh,
things or our region having-
So I think that's a person-by-person opinion, and I know Claudia has one, and we'll get her up here in a second to answer that question. Mostly because she teaches about, of course, federal government, or not federal, but state government all the time, and she's got more experience with it than I do. So you'll probably have to ask her about that, how Texas measures up with other states, but I'm sure she's got one. Awesome. Well, with that, we'll end today. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you all, and have a great Saturday.
And remember to vote on Tuesday.
Go vote on Tuesday.
And set your clocks back at 2 a.m.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.